All right, and we are back here on the GSMC football podcast. And for the second part of the show, we are going to now talk about Big Dom and his impact on the Eagles. So, yeah, for those of you that don't know who Big Dom is, he is um, one of their security guards. So I think he's the head of security, right? Um, yeah, head of security. Yeah, Dom DeSandro. Now he was a part of that altercation with Dre Greenlaw when the Eagles played the 49ers. That was on December 3rd, and the Eagles lost that game 42-19, and that kind of began the downward spiral for the Eagles, was that game. But something else to note, um so after this happened, and he was suspended from the sidelines. Now he did come back and he was on the sidelines for the playoff game against the Bucks. But yeah, so he was gone for he couldn't be on the sidelines for the rest of the regular season, and the Eagles ended up going 1-5. Now, um, something to note. So Nick Sirianni reportedly got into arguments with staff members and players on the sidelines following the incident involving the team's head of security. Players reportedly missed his presence during games, um, noting that the team hadn't been executing well or winning since his absence. Um, yeah, and again, this is when the Eagles started off 10-1. So, um, so he was responsible, supposedly, was instrumental in controlling Sirianni's emotions on the sidelines, and his absence led to Sirianni engaging in numerous arguments with players and coaches during games. Now, if that actually is true, it's a bad look on Nick Sirianni. It really is. Now, the one thing that I go back to, and this one isn't from this year, you go back to, um, the Super Bowl against the Chiefs. If you remember, I don't remember. I don't remember specifically what happened on the play, but if you know what I'm talking about, where he was like, I guess he was motioning to the Chiefs to come back, and you saw Jalen Hurts like push his hand down. I feel like which again, that was also a bad look too. Um, I feel like with the Eagles, Nick Sirianni's kind of was feeling himself a little bit. These last couple of years. I mean, you got last year, and then you start off 10-1. There's also that clip of him, yelling at Chiefs fans after they beat the Chiefs in the regular season this year. It's Nick Sirianni was feeling himself a little bit. That's why I think what happened with the Eagles, I think that should have humbled him a little bit. Now again, this is coming from a Giant fan, but I think a lot of fans would agree that, Nick Sirianni, for a lot of people, maybe isn't a likable guy. But this is a bad look. If you need your head of security to kind of calm you down, and stop arguments from happening on the sidelines. I mean, you're the head coach. You have to be, obviously you're going to get mad at certain things, and emotions are part of the game. I mean, again, you look at what happened with Travis Kelce and Andy Reid on the sideline. I mean, again, Travis Kelce almost knocked him over, but that again, that's a player towards a coach. Now you got a coach towards a player, like losing it. I mean, obviously, coaches yell at players all the time, but I mean, I don't know what the specifics are with these arguments that he's getting into with players, but I mean, you could kind of take some context clues on certain things that Sirianni has done. Like I said, what happened in the Super Bowl against the Chiefs, and say, yeah, maybe there's an issue there. And again, I mean, the team spiraled out of control, but I really have a hard time believing that was the reason why. So you're saying that he was the reason why the Eagles lost all those games? I mean, I think it's just because the 49ers really just demoralized them after the game. I mean, they won 42-19, and then the season just spiraled out of control after that. But yeah, so he was ejected, like I said, after the altercation with Dre Greenlaw. Again, they were 10-1. And it just everything fell apart. I mean, they lost to the Cardinals, they lost to the Giants. I mean, they lost to some teams that were not very good this year. But I don't know. I have a hard time thinking it was just because of him. Now, like I said, if he's someone that is there to kind of calm down Sirianni. Well, that's again not a good look on Sirianni. But I don't think he's the reason why the Eagles collapsed. I think it's because, you know, everything again, the 49ers demoralized them. Then they lose to the Cowboys. Again, they lose to the Cardinals. They lose to the Giants. I mean, they almost lost the game. They almost gave the Giants the game in Philadelphia. I mean, they were, up by a couple of scores, and then they um, fumbled on a kickoff. Giants scored a touchdown. There was a pick six. Giants scored Giants got a pick six off of that. I mean, the game was close. Um, they should have ran away with that game, but they let the Giants come back. And then, I mean, you get to the playoff game against the Buccaneers, and he's back for that game, and it's because of Big Dom that the Eagles couldn't tackle. I mean, they just like could not tackle. It was some of the worst tackling I've ever seen, and I think it was just a team that just wasn't in it. Um, I don't know. So I don't think it has to do really with him. I think it just has to do with the fact that I mean, the 49ers really kind of like, you know, took their hearts out, and they just were not in it the rest of the year. But I guess he had a significant impact because I mean, you got players saying that, they just weren't, focused once you know, he got suspended from the sidelines. Because then actually the NFL came out and said something. So trying to find where, because I had it noted here. It was regarding like having security on the sidelines. If I can find it, because I have it in my notes here. But yeah, I mean, they basically just said like, you know, they basically just said like you gotta, make sure that you know you guys are controlled down there. But I don't know where I have it in my notes, but whatever. You get the idea though. But I can't sit here and say that that's the main reason that the Eagles fell apart. I can't say that. I mean, again, the Buccaneers game, that was some of the worst tackling that I've ever seen. So I can't sit here and be like, well, that's the reason why they they fell apart at the end. I don't know why I can't find it, but regardless, the NFL did come out and say something regarding the incident. Um, but yeah, I mean, listen, next year's a big year for Sirianni. It is. I mean, the Eagles have to be better next year. Because if they come out next year and it's more the same, yeah, then he has to be gone. Because I mean, you had Eagles fans already talking about him losing his job, and this is after the first 2 years, he made the playoffs, and you make the playoffs this year, but it kind of fell apart at the end. Now you're already talking about him getting let go. I don't know about that. But I mean the kind of collapse that they had. I mean, it's pretty close to, maybe, considering maybe we need a change. But I think, listen, you lost two great coordinators. I mean, you lost Jonathan Gannon and you lost Shane Steichen. And the guys they brought in, it just didn't pan out. Now you got Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio, so maybe things change. We'll just have to wait and see. But and the other thing too is, I also wanted to talk about Jason Kelsey because so he hasn't officially retired, and it's interesting because you had I think they asked Kelsey during media week about him, and he said no. I think he said like, oh, he's got some football left in him. Like Jason Kelsey hasn't come out and flat out said I'm done. Now it looked like it was implied because he was emotional after the game against the Bucs, but yeah, that's just something to note. And I think from here on out, if unless the player directly says that they're retiring, I'm not going to be like, all right, well, he's retiring, because it was the media that kind of broke the news, and I just figured, all right, well, I mean, he was emotional, and it seems like, yeah, this is probably it, but yeah, he never came out and said he's retiring. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But yeah, that's another thing. Like they lose Kelsey on the offensive line. That's a huge loss there. That is huge. Um, I mean, he's one of the main reasons why the tush push works. So they might not be able to do it as effectively next year if he's not there. But I mean, again, the defense was just towards the end was really bad. So they're gonna have to fix the defense. I mean, bring in Vic Fangio, who's a good defensive coordinator. We'll see. What he could do with that defense. But I mean, listen, the Eagles have a lot of talent. You also have people in the media coming out and saying that Jalen Hurts is overrated because of the offensive line, because of the additions of A.J. Brown, and you got Devontae Smith. Look at Jalen Hurts. I thought, his first full year starting. I mean, listen, the Eagles made the playoffs, and then you added A.J. Brown, and that elevated his game. But I don't know if I want to say that Jalen Hurts is overrated. I think he's a good quarterback, but yeah, I mean he does again has a lot of he has a great offensive line. He's got good weapons, but yeah, that's you want to surround your quarterback with talent, and he played really well in the Super Bowl that they lost. So I don't know if I want to say he's overrated, but yeah, I can understand why you may have that opinion, but it's going to be a big year for the Eagles because that collapse towards the end of the year. That was I still can't believe it happened. I really can. But they played a lot of close games this year, even the games that they won when they were 10-1. I mean, at one point the only loss they had was against the Jets, which I still don't know how they lost that game, but yeah, they did lose that game. I mean, against the Chiefs, against the Bills, they were playing close. I mean, the Cowboys, when they beat them the first time, the Cowboys could have won that game. I mean, you look at both games against the Commanders were high scoring. One of them, I think, went into overtime. They played in a lot of close games, so it just eventually, then they played the 49ers, and yeah, that was just, that was the end of it. They just, they lost all that momentum, and it just led to a downward spiral. And, again, this stuff coming out with, their head of security and him kind of being there to calm down the head coach, if that's true, that's not a good reflection on the coach. So, yeah, let me know what you guys think about this. And what are your expectations for the Eagles, very early expectations going into next year. So before I go into break, just want to remind you guys again, as always, to tip or donate and get your comments recognized, make sure to go to the following link. That is streamelements.com/gsmcsportsnetwork./tip. Again, that really helps the show, makes the show more interactive between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. Again, that is streamelements.com/gsmcsportsnetwork./tip. And as always, it is displayed on the ticker on the bottom of the show segment down below. So when we come back from our second break of the show, we will talk about some risk-reward free agents for 2024. I'll talk about that when we come back from our second break. So with that being said, stick around and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.